Hey guys, I thought I'd do a garden tour, and I'm starting here with a garden I don't show very much. This is on the side of my house, and it has all deer-proof plants. It's a spice garden, and this year I've dotted in some banana peppers, and on the other bed I've dotted in some cayenne peppers. But this is just catmint, just a beautiful foliage and flower. And then I've got a beautiful low-growing sage, and those were all made from cuttings a couple years ago. I did add in a couple of new cuttings I rooted in the early spring, so I'm expanding on that. Then I also have some lavender. These are cuttings from my sister's garden. These three beautiful lavenders, and a little thyme in the back. But I should mention that these are overturned chaise lounges, and we were replacing them because they had cushions and we didn't like having to cover them all the time. And before we dragged them to the curb, I realized that if I flipped them over, they would make great raised beds. So this was about 3 years ago, and at the time we filled it with wood chips because we had a tree removed. And over the years, the wood chip has broken down, and I've added more soil on top. I have another one over here, but my friend Diane of Down to Earth Gardener requested to see these because she has repurposed a chaise lounge as a beautiful plant stand, a long plant shelf in one of her gardens. Now I have some very rambunctious Vinca major here, and I do always battle the vines that want to come into the soil of the herb garden. But here I have a couple of cayenne pepper plants that I grew from seed. I also grew the banana peppers from seed. And I have a taller sage that it looks like it's budding up and going into bloom. We'll have to revisit this when those buds open up. But and then I have the shorter variety that I have in the other bed. It's also a sage. And I also have some more lavender here being gobbled up by the sage plant, and some more catmint or nepeta here, which will be blooming soon. I can see buds coming on that one as well. And I believe this is a rosemary that I rooted as a cutting last year. And I have a little more thyme, and as you can see, the Vinca major this time of year is very, very enthusiastic. So let's go into the back garden where I usually take you. Okay, from the inside of my gate, I can show you I have a long border here, and I have cut leaf Rudbeckia that grows back here by itself. Came over years ago, I think, from a neighbor's planting, and it grows all along this fence, and it gets to be 6 feet tall with bright yellow Rudbeckia flowers, but the leaves are very pretty, so it looks pretty even when it's short. But I have some geraniums here. These were some of the geraniums I resurrected from storing in a box over the winter, and I have some little seedlings I grew of ageratum. And then here I have more of the catmint. I have this everywhere in pots and in my different gardens, and I just started with 3 little cuttings. This is the easiest plant to grow from cuttings, so now it's everywhere. And my miscanthus grass is starting to green up, put out some new grasses. And as you can see, all along the fence, I've got the tall cut leaf Rudbeckia growing in. And here is my clematis, not yet blooming, but it's forming buds. And again, the star of the show is the lamb's ear. This is a plant that does so well in my garden. I had 2 little plants last year, and now they're huge mounds. So I'm delighted that they have done so well here, right around my homemade raised bed, and I've got buds coming out on the irises. They're appreciating some warmer weather, and I think they're going to be blooming soon. And then my former tomato jungle is hopefully going to be a squash jungle with some wax beans growing in the front. We'll see. But this was a lot of garden debris my friend Lori gave me. And I think I mentioned this, but inadvertently, a lot of daylilies came with it. So I'm just letting them grow. I think the more plants you have in a guild, the healthier the plants are. And I think that it's going to be a living mulch for the produce that I'm growing in here. And my center cut squash, I'm happy to see are getting some new little leaves. They protested when I first planted them and turned a bit yellow, but they're small seedlings that I grew, and I have 4 of those. Apparently they're very vigorous growers, and they're a lot like zucchini, but they're tougher and more pest resistant. So that is a hybrid. I also have some zucchini growing elsewhere in the garden, so we can compare the two. And this is a sign I found at a charity shop, which I just love. I think it's perfect for my vegetable garden. And I have great hope for this garden. We'll see how it goes. And the triangle garden is looking like a bit of a jungle, a little bit messy at the moment, and some things are recovering from frost burn. And then the star of the show in this garden right now, try not to get the air conditioner in the picture, are my collard greens. They've gone to flower, and brassica flowers are so gorgeous. And the pollinators, again, love them. So I try to let some of my brassicas go into flower for them, and also to enjoy this bright pop of color. And over here we have a great plant combo that I'm in love with. I actually am putting out a little short on it, but look at this peachy rose color with the dark purple. And I wish I had put tags on these, so I can't really tell you what variety of heuchera they are, but I sure do like them together. The topiary garden has already rebounded. It too had lots of damage, and it's looking shaggy because I didn't want to cut it back and have it put out new growth before it really warmed up. But they're kind of outgrowing that winter burn from the late frost. So it must be warmer over here because they fared a little bit better than some of the others. And then over here I have some cuttings of Autumn Joy Sedum, which I have everywhere. And I really like how they look in the urns. Let me show you how they look. They just kind of mound up, create a beautiful, I think the leaves are beautiful even when they're not blooming. So it's one of my favorite succulent plants, and it's a hardy succulent in my area. And my lemon trees are bouncing back. I've got 2 of them. And they always look terrible in the winter. They protest about living inside during the winter. And my daughter helped me repot this and put some fertilizer on it. And they're really enjoying the rain and the fresh air and some warm temperatures. Potted up a pot with some moss curled parsley that I grew from seed. And I have a couple of pots of snow peas growing around another geranium I picked up, which is a fuchsia. And this was in the greenhouse for a while it was chilly, but now it's come out here to the deck. My gigantic burning bush, which we pruned back last year, has become gigantic again. So we're gonna take pruners to that in a little while and reduce its diameter. And then back here it's gotten very shady now that the burning bush has leafed out. And I have a shade container planted with heuchera, and it's all different types. And again, I don't know what the names of these are, except for this one. I think it's called Dale's Choice. And I just took some little tissue cuttings and popped those in, and they've taken off really well in this combo. But I'm excited to have this combination back here. I think it looks really beautiful. And then we have an interesting mushroom here. So just a little bit of rain brings out those mushrooms. And this whole area is just greening up. Now, as you can see, my coral bark Japanese maple did rebound. It was hit by the frost, but it did put out pretty quickly some new leaves. And boy, is that going to be a beautiful, beautiful tree. I just love that. It's still tiny, but it's getting bigger every year. And then I also have a sapling back here, and it needs some shaping eventually, but that is also a Japanese maple. And it's also recovering from that late frost. And we planted these golden snow peas together, and they have done a good job climbing the trellis, but I'm still waiting for flowers and pods to form. And back there, of course, is some more autumn joy sedum. These are beautiful euonymus back here. It's just so bright and pretty. I think it's going to be a really pretty combination, not only with the green, but the red of this Japanese maple. And along here, we have Lily of the Valley naturalizing. Now this always dies back when it gets hot, but it's gorgeous in the spring. And the blooms are so fragrant. And they look like little fairy bells. They're really special little blooms. Just like little bells. So pretty. And they smell amazing. Over here, I'm very excited. This week, I planted the teeniest, tiniest mini mauvette hydrangea. And this is part of my campaign to put in hydrangeas that bloom on new wood. And this particular smooth leaf variety does. So I'm hoping it likes its spot. And that's a proven winner's plant. I picked the quart size, as you can see, it's very tiny, but I planted it and it hasn't missed a beat. So hopefully, so far, so good. I was kind of excited about this pot. A lot of these Dusty Millers overwintered, and I have put in a couple of borage seedlings, which I grew. And I think that those blue flowers with the silver foliage, it's going to be a really pretty combo. So I wasn't expecting for that pot to fill itself with Dusty Miller. That was a great surprise. And up here, I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I used all of my miscanthus grass from around the garden and out front to make a path. And the more I walk on it, the more it flattens. So I think that's gonna look nice and tidy. And then I showed this in a short, but this garden is looking really beautiful. And I think I'll start over here where it's more shady. This is the Solomon Seal, and I've highlighted this in a short too. I showed the blooms, but from above, take a look at the color on this. This is a gloomy day, and this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous green. I also have some hostas coming up here across the back, and I have some beautiful new hostas from last year that I planted across here, and they're a smaller variety. I think it's called stained glass. And I have a Japanese fern coming up in the middle there. And I did put a peony in the back, which may not bloom until next year, but I can be patient. But this whole cluster of plants, which I put together last year, has turned out so pretty. I didn't even imagine it looking this way. But we've got the beautiful golden euonymus and And the heuchera, which is now sending up some blooms, looks like it's about to open up. Let me see if I can focus in on that. They're not quite open yet, but it's sending up some delicate blooms. And we'll come along here. We have strappy daylily foliage. Of course, some more autumn joycetum, which you'll see throughout my gardens. And our chives are in bloom. So this must be their second year. Once they make seeds, they'll seed themselves back into the container and grow new chives next year in the spring. So they'll perpetuate themselves. I'm taking these pots from a funny angle because I don't want you to see how messy my polytunnel's looking. But my juncus grasses are coming back. They're sending up new spikes, and the beautiful purple pansies are still going strong. So let's go around here. And in here, I planted some red Reuben basil around some pom-pom mixed dahlias. I've got two different tubers in here, so I'm hoping that'll be a pretty combo. And I have some lavender coming back in a pot, and lots of brassicas here in bloom. Some of them are actually radishes, but isn't that just the brightest yellow for spring? And my fava beans, which I planted to improve the soil, continue to bloom. Let me show you what they look like. I highlighted them as well in a short, but they're so interesting. These are already starting to turn to pods, but they're a black and white bloom. And I think the foliage and flowers are just gorgeous on this. I had no idea how pretty a fava bean was, but I expect I'll be getting quite a lot of fava beans just from about 8 or 10 plants. And I've got my bachelor buttons in the back, and they're starting to finally gain some height. So I'm hoping to see some flowers come out soon. My green onions look pretty happy that warm weather's come out. I have another pot of lavender, and this is lavender I grew from seed that my son Charlie gave me. And over here I have some black hulled barley, which looks like maybe it's getting ready to put up some fronds of barley. We'll see. It's looking quite grassy, but it was also planted as a soil improver. But it's a very beautiful plant. And I planted some tomatoes here. I've got cream sausage tomatoes, which I believe is a cherry type. Maybe a plum. I'll have to see. It's my first time growing cream sausage tomatoes. So I have 2 of those in the front. And my husband requested that I grow some beefsteak tomatoes this year. So I have those along the back. And they're putting on some size already. Those were in the snail rolls. And I have punctuated this garden with 2 more dahlias that I've lost the tag to, but they look like they're matching. So we'll see. 1 on each side. And then my spinach garden is looking quite pathetic. And my baby peach tree is growing about 1 inch a day. Must like spring. So I'm excited about that. I'll grow it in a pot for about a year, and then I'll find a permanent spot for it. And then my hostas have come up. And behind the polytunnel, I'm paying a little bit more attention to this shade garden back here. My friend Lori gave me some Solomon seal to put back here, and she was excited to see how happy I was with the Solomon seal she gave me last year. So I've brought, it's nice to repeat plants in your garden, so I've brought Solomon seal to this little corner now. And she also gave me a beautiful calla lily plant, which is so pretty. They're really exquisite. So I'm hoping everything takes really well. I think the calla lily is not a perennial in my area. May have to lift that when the weather turns. The Solomon seal will come back every year and just continue to thicken up in this area. So happy to have a little brightness and a little height to this shady corner. Happy to say my red twig dogwoods are gaining some size around this beautiful bench, and they're leafing out. And their stems are red during the cold months. And then they're just a beautiful leafy plant throughout the growing season. And we'll see if they put on flowers this year. But this is also a pretty little corner, and I have a little seedling here of a Japanese red maple. And this one was more protected, I guess, because it didn't have experienced the winter burnout being back here in the woodland. Lots of the succulents came back in my succulent garden that I set up last year. And I wish I had kept more tags. This is Sun Sparkle Wildfire. That's got some beautiful color. And I've got a couple things over here growing. And I needed a drought tolerant option for these pots. Got some hen and chicks here. But I'm pleased that everything was hardy enough to come back. I may have lost one succulent, but I don't even remember what it was. Here's a good pot right here. I've got 3 different varieties. So I love that. And we're right next to what might be my favorite garden. This used to be the pink garden, but it is full of some beautiful shady spot items. I'll start here with this hellebore. And this just loves this spot. Isn't that beautiful? Now these are at the end of their life, but they're really sturdy. They started out as white with pinkish purple polka dots. It's part of the wedding collection called Confetti Cake. And it's beautiful. The leaves are beautiful. The blooms were beautiful. Hopefully it's gonna make some seed and drop the seeds. Here's some seed pods in here. And those should burst open when they dry a bit and mature. But that's a gorgeous hellebore. That was a gift from my friend Lori too. Every time I do a tour, I realize how many plants she's given me. These are some bleeding hearts, which I bought as bare root. It almost looks like they've put out some seed pods too. Let me show you close up. Look at that. That would be exciting if they made little babies. I didn't even know they went to seed, but they look wonderful. All 3 of them came back. And these disappear, guys. As soon as it gets hot, the whole plant disappears for another year until the next spring. Isn't that pretty? And I did bring out my spider plants, which had kind of a rough winter. They were a little bit neglected inside, but they will bounce back just fine. And I still have no seats for my chairs. They're just for a sculptural effect. And I've got a beautiful hosta that's come back. And I have a frost damaged hydrangea here, but I do see it's getting some new leaves. So maybe I'll get some blooms from that. We'll see. I think that might be a newer variety that blooms on old and new wood. So I'm a little bit hopeful. But lots got damaged this year with that late frost. But I'm just loving this garden, and it's starting to gain some maturity. And I just moved some hostas over here to kind of bookend the whole garden. Those are transplanted from elsewhere in the garden. And that can kind of harken back to the hosta on that side. So it's nice to repeat plants. And I've got 3 rather mature looking guacamole hostas. And they are beautiful bright green. And behind them, those are grown from cuttings. And I think they're laurels. They were just branches that were hanging over that I pruned from a neighbor's yard. And I just put the pruning in the ground, just 2 sticks. And about 4 years later now, they finally look like shrubs. So I'm really thrilled with this little shade garden. It's got some maturity and pops of color. and ephemeral spring flowers. And I've just started working on the rustic garden bed. I think this might be a video on its own. Keep adding more things in. But right now I can show you that the columbine are looking gorgeous. Again, it's such a pretty woodland plant. And I decided to add these in because this side of the rustic garden bed does get more shade. I put some zinnias and some marigolds there. And this is an ornamental oregano, which comes back every year. My friend Lori gave it to me. And these have finally shown up. These are tiger lilies I planted last year, and they never came up. And I thought, well, they didn't like it here, but they must have been growing underground because now they're coming up. And 2 out of 3 of my azaleas put out some beautiful purple blooms. So I have to make a note to myself to maybe give them some fertilizer. And I've got some snap peas growing here, looking quite vigorous. And an Alberta spruce and lots of ferns and hostas back here. And they always look so fresh in the spring. Once the heat rolls in, they're not as happy, but look how pretty that looks in a woodland garden.